All right, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third session of Freddie Mac Affordable Webinar Series. I am Amy Kong, Asian Real Estate Association of America 2021 National President. So today, our topic is deconstructing a generation. Interesting, right? We'll be looking at the millennial demographic research and get actionable data and insight about the borrower of the future. I am interested to learn more about this. I'm sure you know this is the biggest pool of consumer that we are serving, right? So how can we not know them well? It is so important for us to have all this information so that we can help close the AAPI homeownership gap. So I don't want to take up too much of a time. I know that our speaker is ready. So let me quickly introduce her. Her name is Yana Davidovich, if I could spell it correctly. Yana is a director of market research and insights with the single family marketing and communication team at Freddie Mac. In this position, Yana is responsible for market and consumer research, housing insights, and strategic analysis. So Yana has over 14 years of experience in the residential mortgage and housing industry, spanning the origination, new construction, and secondary market sector. So prior for her to join Freddie Mac, she was actually a manager of market intelligence and analytics and an economics and strategic research manager at Poti Group and Fannie Mae. She also holds a BBA in finance and an MA in economics from University of Cincinnati and Cleveland State University. So thank you so much, Yana, for joining us. I know that you had some challenges in getting on, but now we can see you and hear you. So take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. My apologies again for having some different, apparently I've had some Zoom issues. Well, thank you, Amy, for having me here. Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be participating in such an amazing event. We at Freddie Mac closely monitoring the latest housing market trends and factors impacting national housing demand. And one of those factors, as many of you know, has been shifting demographics. Just recently, we have compiled a very comprehensive and, as a result, lengthy research that delves into the largest consumer generation cohort in the United States. This all-inclusive research covers an array of dimensions, characteristics of the Generation Y, otherwise known as Millennials. This research also covers their migration trends, the age demographic, and so on and so forth. So later this year, we're hoping to compile the second edition of this insights, where we will update some of the information related to COVID, latest geo outlook, and so on and so forth. But for now, please stay tuned. Follow us on Single Family Freddie Mac website. So let's get started. Let's start with the introduction. Last year, 4.4 million millennials turned 33, a home buying age, a peak home buying age, and approximately another 4.6 million will reach the same milestone each year in the next decade, making this generation the largest ever to move through the housing pipeline. So to attract and better serve this segment, a group of potential buyers, we across the housing ecosystem need to expand our understanding of this generation. In the next 30 to 45 minutes, we will examine who millennials are and how they differ from prior generation in terms of diversity, life stage shifts, education, income, compensation patterns, and consumption patterns. We also look at the impact millennials are making on the housing market and how we, the industry participants, can help solve the challenges these potential buyers are facing. Moving on to, so with that, let's go into some of the detailed findings. In this next section, we'll cover the defining characteristics of the millennials, and we'll also compare this cohorts to prior generations. Let's take a look at some of the detailed findings. So millennials, population born between 1981 and 1996, are arguably the most influential US generation the nation has seen since the baby boomers. In 2019, they've actually reached the point of where they became a largest generation across segments. We've calculated that nearly 22% of Americans fall into the millennial generation cohort. One interesting fact that is certainly important to note here is that millennials, some of the millennials are still in their 20s. And in fact, if you look carefully at the chart on the right, you can see that the group of young millennials, the first two bars, are larger in numbers than the group we call older millennials, the two bars on the right of the chart. What does this mean? More millennials will be entering life stages in the coming years, which will in turn, among other things, will drive homeownership rate higher. Next page. Across all states and regions, about 90% of millennials today live in metropolitan areas, surpassing Gen Xers at 84% and baby boomers at 68%, when they're at the age of millennials of 23 to 38. Additionally, more than 4 in 10 millennials live in high city centers. In 2019, the largest concentration of population millennials were observed in New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, and that is essentially driven by the range and abundance of high-paying jobs and a big city lifestyle that young adults are essentially craving. Moving on to the next slide. Millennials make up the most racially and ethnically diverse adult generation in US history. In 2019, 45% of Generation Y attributed themselves to minorities. Moreover, the share of Hispanic millennials, 21%, is almost double the share of Hispanic baby boomers at 11%, as you can see on the chart. Millennials also hold the highest share of Asian population at 8%. There's certainly a view that diversity is the most defining characteristics of this generation, and that in turn could impact future housing trends, as you would imagine. According to Pew Research, analysis of census data show that both Hispanic and Asian population are nearly twice as likely to live in multi-generational household than the whites. If this trend holds, we will certainly expect to see an increase in the overall share of millennial generation household nationwide, which could in turn drive shifts in the demand of housing types and of course financing, as you would imagine. Next slide. Let's next take a look at a few life stage statistics. As of 2020, millennials trailed Gen Xers and baby boomers in percentage of marriages and population with children when they were ages 24 and 39. At a marriage rate of 46%, millennials are trailing behind both Gen Xers at 56% and baby boomers at 62%. This difference across generations should show that these young adults are staying single longer, which is tied to various socioeconomic factors such as career path, life arrangements, living arrangements, educational goals, and financial stability. Many of you that know that the two major life stage events that often lead to household formation and of course further on homeownership are marriage and having children. And our analysis do show that delaying marriage or remaining single past the prime marriage age bracket has depressed this generation homeownership rate. We know that married millennials make up highest share of homeowners, 51% absent of children and 65% with children, while homeownership rate for single stand at about 28 to 29%, depending on the presence of children. Next page. Do you know that millennials are the most educated adult generation? 42% of them hold a bachelor degree or higher, compared with just 29%, compared with 29% of Gen Xers and 28% of baby boomers when they were the same age. More than 10 percentage point jump in higher education for millennials can somewhat be explained by the timing of the Great Recession. Older millennials came of age when the Great Recession began back in 2007. As unemployment surged during that time period, many of them struggled to find jobs and chose to go to college or continue past undergraduate degree to pursue an advanced degree. Interestingly, a view into the share of population with bachelor or advanced degrees across millennial cohort by race show that Asian millennials have the highest share of population, nearly 70% with bachelor or higher degree, the highest we've seen. This overall generational increase in post-secondary schooling is certainly one of the factors shaping the generation consumption behavior and, of course, life choices. And we are seeing this in numbers across the housing market. And I wonder if it also can be an indicator of what lays ahead when it comes to homeownership trends and choices. Next page. While 40% of millennials have at least a bachelor degree, their numbers do vary by region. The breakout by state and metro areas show that a high proportion of millennials with bachelor's or advanced degrees tend to reside in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic areas, as you can see in the map. Moving on to the next slide. Let's move on to student debt. The rise in student debt compared to other debts such as credit card, car debt held by consumers has been a hot topic in the media and election campaigns, with much debate over proposals of debt forgiveness. The debt levels for the young adult population is tied to rising tuition costs, and greater percentage of them, as we just saw, attending or having attended college. As of 2020, roughly 1/3 of all the millennial population had student debt. The total dollar value of outstanding millennial student debt loan debt equated to nearly $501 billion, which is about 32% of all student debt in the US. This equates to an average of $34,000 for each borrower. To think of it another way, the average student loan payment stands at $393 per month, while the median student debt loan payment is $222. A study by JP Morgan found that the typical family's median student loan payment is 5.5% of take-home income, which certainly is manageable if a person completes their education. Also, we are able to confirm that people with advanced degrees do carry a larger debt, but they also have a higher earning trajectory and potential. Often student debt is seen as a deterrent to homeownership for millennials. While student debt might delay homeownership, it is unlikely to derail it, as the earning potential is significantly higher for those who pursue and complete their education, as you could surely see on the right-hand side chart, the blue line. Moving on to the next slide. As we talked about earning potential, let's next take a look at income. Millennial median personal income surpassed those of prior generation when measured at the same age as today's millennials. Millennial average personal median income in 2019 reached $68,000, which is higher than that of both Gen Xers at $63,000 and baby boomers at $53,000. Some of the potential reasons for the higher income levels are increased level of education than prior generation, leading to better paying jobs, as we just saw, higher female labor force participation rate, as well as higher female wages. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, Asian millennials' median income is above the level of all other races and ethnicities, which makes sense if you recall from a few slides back. Highest ratio of that segment having bachelor and advanced degrees. That tends to lead, as we just saw, to higher earning potential, plus high share of Asian population tend to cluster in high-cost areas such as Seattle, San Francisco, New York, DC, which on average have higher median income across the area. Moving on to the next slide. Millennial and labor force. Millennials make up 36% of workforce, making them the largest generation in US labor force. 59 million of them were working or looking for work in 2020. A large share of the millennial generation is still in the relatively early stages of their careers, which means their impact on the workforce and economy will be formidable in the future years, but not yet. This is especially true because of their high education credentials. Another highly discussed topic we wanted to cover here is the gig economy. Since 2010, there has been a steady rise in the number of people participating in the gig economy or the non-salaried labor force. We define the sector as being made up of people who earn primary or supplemental income from freelance and other independent work arrangements such as Uber and others. McKinsey Global Institute estimate that the total number of participating in the gig economy as of 2019 was 68 million people. This is notable increase from 2011 report of only 16 million people participating in the gig economy. Experts expect that these numbers will accelerate even further in the future. An MBO report estimates that millennials make up 38% of the gig economy workers, compared to 29% of Gen Xers and third of baby boomers. Without a doubt, recent COVID-19 development had put a bit of a damper into certain gig economy sectors, such as independent drivers, as well as many of other service-related segments. However, as the economy starts to improve, and we're starting to see this already, the continued growth of the gig economy is inevitable, and we as an industry need to prepare for it. Moving on to the next page. So far, we talked about millennials as a homogeneous group, but as with any generational group, a span of 15 years of age means you will encounter differences in consumer needs and priorities as people grow older, their opinions shift, and they experience new life stage events. We found that further consumer segmentation is necessary and helps to address the diverse needs of individual cluster of millennial consumers and improves audience targeting for both real estate professionals as well as lending institutions. To see how this can be valuable, consider the fact that two individuals who are similar in age and income don't necessarily share similar needs, values, habits, or interests. Let's look at the example of a few personas that we at Freddie Mac had just created across first-time home buyer segment. In one case, there's a young couple who is looking to start a family and essentially expand and maybe have their mom living with them. In another, there's a single female who has a favorable financial situation and is looking to buy in order to start building equity and wealth. The motivation behind the desires to own a home between these two personas are different. Hence, the messaging you would use to attract the attention of these two buyer personas is going to vastly differ. While in some ways, these personas are linear to life cycles of the average person, the content you would create and the home buyer barriers you are addressing for each of these client personas must revolve around where they are at exact point in their lives and things each persona will deem valuable and relevant to them. These preferences and barriers drive consumer consumption needs for sure. So for instance, a survey done by Realtor.com reported that some 80% of pet-owning home buyers closed on a property said they would pass up an otherwise perfect home if it didn't meet the needs of their pets. What does this mean? We need to understand our consumers better. And as such, we have created this view of consumer personas, and the research is extremely valuable. We already seen some impact to it. So building a successful strategy to address customer needs is imperative. If any of you are would like to learn more about what the Freddie Mac consumers look like and what we have developed, please do contact us. We'll be happy to share some of this information with you. Moving on to the next segment, millennial and housing. Let's start with homeownership. Similar to other life stage stats, millennial homeownership is trailing behind older generation. It is tracking at 48% as of 2020, which is below the rates of older generation when ages 24 and 39. It also below the national average of 66%. And that is driven by multiple factors, some of which we've already covered, and some will be covered in more details later. However, despite the challenges, the homeownership rate has been one on the upward trajectory as this generation continued to mature, grow into the life stages. Has been especially visible in this past year. If you look at the chart on the right, we have seen a 5 percentage point increase in homeownership rate from 2019 to 2020. This is the highest ramp up in homeownership rate this generation had seen thus far. The main driver of the jump has been COVID-19 pandemic, as you would imagine, right? With factors such as record high savings rate, record low interest rate, fear of missing out, and health safety concerns, all driving more millennial towards homeownership. While there are no optimal homeownership rate, we expect a further influx of home buyers in this generation as they get older, advance in their careers, reach certain age milestones, and pay their student debt up. Next page. In fact, household projections indicate that over the next decade, the fastest growing household type will be millennial families with children ages 35 to 44. And according to US Census data, that type of household married with children generate the highest homeownership rate among household types, about mid to high 70 homeownership rate as per the orange line reading on the right-hand side chart. Combine this household growth projections with attributed homeownership rate, you can certainly see why we all calling for a ramp up in household demand going forward. Moving on. One other important subject to bring up when thinking about level of millennial homeownership is the historical variation in homeownership rate by race and ethnicity. Millennial generation, Hispanic, Latino, and African American Black homeownership rates are substantially below those of non-Hispanic white rates, as you can see in the chart above. Taking into consideration this variation in rates, add to that the higher share of minorities was in the millennial generation that we just covered a few slides back, and then other older generation, the result is lower overall millennial homeownership rate. Moving on. Let's move to homeownership barriers and challenges. Like most older Americans, millennials see homeownership as their primary financial goal, with the top motivators being wealth creation and stable place to live and creating family memories. But their path to homeownership, as many of you know today, is covered with many challenges. Delayed marriage, financial challenges of racial and ethnic minorities, less financial security, and higher debt all contribute to lower homeownership rates of millennials. On top of that, rising home prices and record low inventory of affordable housing for sale have also impeded homeownership. Let's take a look at a few of the barriers in more detail. A 2019 survey by Apartment List found that nearly half of millennial renters who say that they want to buy a home actually have no savings set aside for a down payment. And though we might have seen some improvement during 2020 when savings rate went up, many prospective homebuyers still find savings for a down payment to be the biggest challenge they have to overcome. Numerous millennials have a skewed notion of the minimum down payment required to buy a home. One of the Freddie Mac studies revealed that nearly 42% of millennials are under the assumption that they are required to put a 20% down payment on a home, or they're really unsure how much is required. In reality, the median down payment in 2019 was 12% for all homebuyers and 6% for first-time homebuyers. According to the census data, 47% of millennial first-time homebuyers put down between 0 and 5% on a home, while 15% put down between 6 and 10%. This is where we, housing market professionals, can educate consumers on options and products that are available through Freddie Mac and across the industry. Yet another important consideration when mining homeownership is financial literacy. Despite the fact that high share of millennials having college and graduate degrees than any other older cohorts, they're less financial literate. According to a 2018 study by TIAA Institute, only 16% of them could be considered financially literate, compared to 34% of adults assessed of the same age range back 10 years ago in 2009. Moreover, only 19% of the millennials that assess their own financial knowledge as high or very high qualify as a financial literate. The same report also found that fintech usage, such as mobile apps, when coupled with financial illiteracy, creates a greater tendency for poor money management, suggesting that the usage of financial tools or fintech tools is not a substitute for financial education, but a complement. Something to think about, right? Millennials today have more choices, more tools, more debt, and more serious consequences from the financial decisions that they make. But we look for ways to expand homeownership opportunities to largest cohort in the population. Improvement in homebuyer education is imperative. In fact, we at Freddie Mac will be just released an updated homeownership education curriculum that many of you may be familiar with, but we will discuss this in more details later. Our research team is also in the process of creating some of the findings that we were able to uncover through a survey on understanding what drives that for education levels. Moving on to the next slide. When it comes to millennials and home buying process, here are a few interesting findings we were able to capture in this latest consumer survey that I just mentioned. So here's what we found. We found that 76% of millennials believe that the benefits of purchasing a home largely outweighs the risks, which certainly makes sense. Remote work certainly have increased millennial desire to purchase a home, 75%. Millennials rely heavily on their families for both financial and housing knowledge support. Interestingly, Asian and Hispanic families are more likely to provide financial assistance than white and Black families. Nearly half of them still don't have a strong savings plan in place to reach their financial goals. We also saw a high preference to use financial app that can help automatically save for a home down payment, something to think about as industry professionals. One interesting finding that sort of pricked my ears is 25% of millennials are afraid of having a mortgage. A few factors may play into that fear. One is higher student debt that we've seen for any other generation before them. And another is and sort of an echo effect of the last Great Recession, when many young millennials saw their parents losing their homes and were losing all the equity in their homes and disappearing overnight. Moving on to the next slide. Home buying activity. As we previously mentioned, millennial impact on the housing market has been growing and will continue to grow in the next decade. As this massive age demographic continue to transition into life stages, it consequently pushes a surge in overall home buying demand. Millennial share of primary home purchase loans has been gradually increasing in the past 10 years and is projected to increase even further. In 2020, millennials accounted for more than half of purchase mortgages, 52% to be exact, bought by Freddie Mac. And based on our analysis of external data, our counterparts had seen similar trends, not higher. Moving on to the next slide. Let's look at the first-time buyer activity. Freddie Mac 2020 acquisition data shows that millennials comprised an increasingly share of first-time home buyers at 67%. The housing industry is certainly feeling the impact of millennials stepping into the space, which is why it is imperative to understand the characteristics of this consumer segment. our evaluation of first-time homebuyer profile revealed that there are the recent first-time home buyers are older and earn higher income than first-time home buyers a decade ago. We're also seeing that the number of millennial first-time home buyers has increased even more as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, as many renters who've been postponing home purchase seek the security and stability of homeownership. Curiously, the 2020 ramp up in young millennial cohort was more noticeable than the increase in older millennial group. Moving on to next slide. One other interesting trend worth noting is that two largest generations are now competing for similar valued properties, which in this current environment of bidding wars could be yet another deterrent for the first-time home buyers who have very little equity to none with to play with in order to win the bids that are happening across the market. There are several hypotheses that might explain the recent trend of millennials and baby boomers going after similar price properties. One is limited starter home inventory could be causing millennials to rent longer so that when they buy their first home and when they're ready to buy their first home, they skip starter homes altogether and buy larger, more expensive first homes than prior generation. And also baby boomers are starting to downsize and are buying smaller homes now. While the gaps between prices of homes bought by millennials and baby boomers no longer exist, the average loan amount borrowed by millennials just certainly outpaced the amount borrowed by baby boomers, as you would imagine, right? Low down payment made by first-time home buyer millennial buyers explain that difference and that divergence. The down payment percentage baby boomers paid in 2020 was more than double of the millennials. Baby boomers certainly have more equity to work with, right? That's something that they've accumulated over the years. And as a result, increasing home prices and lower down payment. We anticipate millennials will accumulate higher mortgage debt than any other generation before them. Moving on to next one. A few more points to make about housing market activity before we move on to the next section. First, though millennials are more likely to live in urban centers, if you recall from a few slides back, than older generation, a higher share of them tend to purchase homes in more affordable regions. We also wanted to note that the most active millennial home buyer markets back in 2020 were Houston, Chicago, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Washington, D.C. Hasn't really shifted much over the years, so we've seen the same trend back in 2019, but just to give you a sense of where the liveliest activity you would see when it comes to millennial purchases. Texas was by far the leader, with 5 metropolitan areas making it to the top 20 metro list. We've also seen quite a lot of activity happening in what we would call Midwest. Idaho has one of the highest home price appreciations we've seen. It's all essentially the migration patterns of millennials seeking more affordable properties, of course, if they have a choice to work remote. That brings us to our last section of this presentation, homeownership challenges and recommendations. Despite being a diverse, tech-savvy, better educated, higher earning generation, it is struggling to reach the American dream more than any prior generation. There are formidable issues depressing millennial homeownership rate. And in this next section, we've highlighted a few of those, along with potential solutions and recommendations. Let's start with changing demographics. As we have mentioned previously, along with the high population number, this generation brings a higher than ever degree of racial ethnic diversity to the US population. The highest share of minorities within this demographic is likely to lead to a reduced homeownership rate for this cohort. How can we, as an industry, help to reduce the homeownership gap? Let's start with the Freddie Mac. broadening educational resources both in content and language availability, establishing a program to address financial capabilities and mortgage solution for communities of color, developing plans to further expand partnership is something that Freddie Mac has been doing so far and continue to push on those strategies. We also highlighted a few options for the industry to consider, such as increase in outreach programs, provide more targeted and effective financial education program, as well as increase awareness and better customized down payment assistance program. In fact, I wanted to point something out. In our recent survey, we found that majority of the first-time home buyers are not aware of the products that are available in the market that are targeted towards first-time home buyers with low down payment options, and they were also not aware of any down payment assistance programs that are available across the market. That's something that we definitely can push on a bit more. Moving on. Low financial literacy. Yet another challenge we discussed earlier is low financial literacy, which is more common with millennials, even though more online resources are available. This raises the question of why this educational offering haven't improved millennial financial literacy. Creating partnership across the housing industry ecosystem to strengthen the financial literacy of these young adults is certainly imperative. What is Freddie Mac doing to address this issue? We offer educational resources such as Freddie Mac Credit Smart in multiple languages to educate homeowners and help housing professionals to guide consumers. Freddie Mac is also partnering across the housing ecosystem to help connect borrowers with valuable resources like our borrower help centers and housing counselors. We also listed a few potential industry options to explore, such as creation of effective financial education apps aimed at tech-savvy millennials, increased outreach of housing professionals through class offerings in high school, colleges, and places of work. There were certainly, we need to think of the options that are available. Yet one more interesting stat that we were able to capture through our latest study, we found that folks that said that they took financial education classes in high school tend to have lower financial literacy scores. So something to think about. Lenders and real estate agents should also continue connecting borrowers with housing counselors who can provide guidance and serve as trusted advisors. Moving on to next, to gig economy. As we discussed previously, millennials embrace the gig economy, and as a result, in the future, we will see shifting dynamics of the labor market. In response to this shift, industry and policy changes are necessary to simplify and streamline access to credit and mortgage origination process for non-payroll workers. What we're currently doing at Freddie Mac is offering lender solution for self-employed applicants that save on underwriting time, such as product advisor, asset and income model, in short, AIM. Potential industry options to explore include expanded view of a acceptable income stream, as well as creation of new innovative mortgage products. Next. Yet another challenge that we brought up previously is the down payment savings. Back in 2019, nearly half of millennial renters who said they want to buy a home had no savings set aside. While alternative down payment options exist, the fact remains that the share of millennials with savings accounts is alarmingly low. Even with the current economic downturn, the housing industry needs to find ways to encourage saving and make sure millennials understand all the down payment options available to them. To solve for this, Freddie Mac is offering low down payment programs such as Freddie Mac Home Possible Mortgage and Freddie Mac Home One, and also promoting down payment assistance program to a real estate professional and other partners. Beyond Freddie, we highlighted potential industry options such as development of digital wallet tools, as well as down payment savings account with special interest rate and or to match deposit to a certain amount. Also, lenders need to be better educated educate potential borrowers about ways to source down payment assistance aside from savings, and increase awareness of and better customized down payment assistance programs. Last but not least, affordable housing shortages. A shortage of affordable housing has hurt millennials more than any other segment of the home buyers. Freddie Mac estimates that there are more than 400,000 missing households headed by 25 to 34-year-olds. A limited supply of land, a shortage of skilled labor, and increasing material costs are all contributing to higher prices and rents. What can we do? At Freddie Mac, we offer loan options that promote renovation and energy efficiency improvement, like Green Choice, Choice Home mortgages, and Choice Renovation Financing. Freddie Mac offers manufactured housing choices as well. Potential industry options to explore would be accelerate housing construction and offering more affordable options to meet the demand. To make some of this happen, local governments should certainly consider relaxing excessive regulation and restrictive zoning policy. And let's not forget innovation of housing solution to create and preserve affordable housing through vacant property conversion, educating developers on an affordable housing opportunities, shared equity models, and financing of new housing choices. This concludes my presentation. I know we have covered quite a lot. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer any of them. I also wanted to point out that the majority of the materials that we've covered is available on Freddie Mac, on single family Freddie Mac website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yana. This information are really interesting. And I like the fact that you guys bring in solution instead of just presenting an issue, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yes. So here in the audience, there is one question. How can ARIA interface with Freddie to fulfill our mission to increase language availability? So within the website or any documents, is there any translated document?
Monica, I think I'm gonna probably rely on you to answer some of that.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so I'm sure you guys are all familiar. We did partner with FHFA and our sister company Fannie Mae to create a clearinghouse of translated documents, and so that is available to everybody. I believe Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Tagalog, and Vietnamese mortgage documents have all been translated, and they're available online. It's a free resource for consumers and for real estate professionals. I'll drop the link in the chat. ARIA is a great partner when it comes to making language access and whatnot available to everyone. Thank you, Vanessa. Definitely, that's the link that you guys want to go to continue that. And we at Freddie Mac are definitely open to continuing that as a mission. If there's more opportunities, we definitely welcome that conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Monica, for answering that question. And we have, a little bit of time left. Anyone have any question? Feel free to type into the chat and we'll definitely answer it for you. But in the meantime, I really appreciate you, Yana and Monica, for your partnership, bringing to this topic. If you missed it, the last two sessions, go back to ARIA YouTube channel or ARIA website, and you will be able to review our previous two sessions that talked about what is Home Possible, Home One, right? And also what is Green Choice and Choice Home. So, I'm very happy to see, Freddie take on the leadership and bring a solution to the challenges. So let's see if there is any other particular question on the chat.
I saw a lot of comments agreeing with some of the statements that I've made. I don't know if you want me to expand on anything else.
Oh, please.
Oh no, I said if anyone wants to expand on any comments that they had, I'll be happy to
Addressed it, right? Yeah. And if you cannot think of any, look at the chat. There is an email, real estate pros prosteam@freddiemac.com. So you can always email them and ask questions as well. So if I'm counting 3, there is no other question. I'm going to release our speaker. I'm counting 1, 2, and 3. Okay, no other question. So thank you so much for your time, Yana, and thank you, Monica, for putting this together. And that concludes our session today. And thank you for participating, and looking forward to our future partnership to continue to close the API homeownership gap. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your attention. Thanks.
Bye-bye.